Hi, this is Kim. This is a quick introduction to the fungi, also pronounced fungi, fungi, fungi. Just a quick reminder that the archaea and the bacteria are both prokaryotes. That means everybody else on this picture is a eukaryote. Eukaryotes have membranous organelles, the DNA is protected in a nuclear envelope, and the cell structure is just far more complex than the prokaryotes. Remember that the prokaryotes are single-celled, the protists are single-celled eukaryotes. Fungi can also be unicellular, but most are multicellular, as we're going to see. So the fungi are a very interesting group of organisms. They include the molds, mushrooms, truffles, morels, puffballs, these horrible chytrid fungi that are killing amphibians worldwide. They're causing the extinction of amphibians. We've had over 200 species of amphibian that we know about that have gone extinct due to these fungi. It's a really terrible thing. And then we have the unicellular fungi, the yeast. So yeast are unicellular, and you can see here they're kind of an oval shape. Yeast make a lot of amazing products for us, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. What are the characteristics of fungi that make them different from all of the other groups? Well, first, it's important to note that they're actually more closely related to animals than they are to plants. Okay, this is a problem for us because when fungi cause diseases in humans, it's very hard to kill them without interfering with our metabolism. Most of the drugs we use to kill pathogens are intended to just affect the pathogen without making the human sick. That's very hard to do when it comes to treating a fungal infection. Fungi are heterotrophs. Okay, so that means they have to eat their food. They cannot make their own food through photosynthesis. And most of them are decomposers. The way they actually eat is they do it outside of their cells. So they secrete enzymes that digest the food extracellularly, in fact, outside of the organism. So that's why when mold grows on something in your refrigerator, it actually gets soupy after a while. So if you had some strawberries in a bowl and they got moldy and they started decomposing, what's happening is that mold is secreting enzymes that are decomposing, digesting, breaking down those strawberries, and then they will absorb those nutrients after the plant material is broken down or whatever it is they're feeding on. Fungi can reproduce asexually or sexually. Some can do both within the same organism. So fungi have cell walls, but the cell wall is made of something different than plant cell walls. Remember, plant cell walls are made of cellulose, which is a structural polysaccharide. And when we talked about polysaccharides, we talked about one additional polysaccharide called chitin. And chitin is a structural polysaccharide, but it has a nitrogenous group. It has a nitrogen contained, so it's a little bit different in structure. And that's one of the characteristics of fungi is that they have cell walls that are made of chitin. Chitin is also what makes up the exoskeletons of arthropods. So crustaceans, insects, other arthropods have an exoskeleton, meaning the skeleton's on the outside of their body, and that's made of chitin also. But this chitin that makes up the cell wall of a fungus is one of the distinguishing characteristics of the fungi. They can be unicellular, multicellular, or dimorphic, meaning there are some fungi that can be unicellular at times and then multicellular at other times, depending on environmental conditions. They like to be in moist environments, and they even like slightly acidic environments. And they can grow without light and with or without oxygen, as you've probably seen when they grow in a container that has a lid in your refrigerator. They interact with other organisms by forming some beneficial or mutualistic associations. One good example of that are the mycorrhizae on the roots of plants. And I should have actually listed this when you get to the section coming up on beneficial roles of fungi. So I will just talk about it now. There are some important fungi that are associated with the roots of certain plants, and they take nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it to a form that the plant can use. That is an incredibly important beneficial association between fungi and plants. Also, lichens, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute. You've probably all seen lichens before. In fact, you might have some growing in your yard. Lichens grow on wood and other structures in the environment, and they are an actual mutualistic association between algae and fungi. So lichen by itself isn't really an organism. It's an association between two different organisms. Okay, fungi can also cause some serious disease, infection in humans and in plants. And really, fungi can infect or cause disease in a lot of different organisms. Fungi reproduce by what are called spores, and you can see the spores here on the mold. These are spores ready to release and reproduce. Fungi are characterized by two structures that really one is made of the other. So hyphae, these are all hyphae. Okay, and then this whole structure that's made up of hyphae is called a mycelium. So here it says mycelium is the vegetative part of the fungus. It's a mass of branching thread-like hyphae. You can see the hyphae here in the mold. You can see the hyphae here in this mushroom. Fungi can be major pathogens in humans and other organisms, like I mentioned a second ago. A mycosis is a disease caused by fungi. Most fungal infections in humans are what are called opportunistic. An opportunistic disease is a disease that's occurring in someone who's immunocompromised or is already sick, and now those pathogens are taking advantage of that. So they wouldn't normally cause disease in a healthy person, only in someone who's either sick or immunocompromised in some way, someone who has cancer, someone who has HIV. Fungal infections are a big deal in cancer and HIV patients. And again, they're very hard to treat or kill because all of the treatments that we use, it's hard to find one that doesn't somehow make you sick or interfere with your normal cell metabolism. Just going to kind of go through a couple of quick ones. Disorders that you're familiar with. Athlete's foot is a fungal disease. So this is a mycosis. Ringworm. This is pretty common in preschools. It's very contagious. Kids touch each other and then they get this. Even though the word worm is here, this is not caused by a fungus. Thrush, this is a yeast infection in the mouth. Of course, there are other types of yeast infection you can get on your skin. Fungus can cause major destruction in plants. I meant to move this slide to before the plants, but valley fever. Valley fever is a fungal disorder that occurs in the lungs. And if you breathe in this fungus, it can make you really, really sick. You breathe in the spores. They are actually in the soil. And it can occur in people or other animals. And it's usually in a windy situation. Okay, so wild and domesticated animals are susceptible. And you can see all these different animals that are susceptible to valley fever. There is no cure, and it can make people very sick. 14,000 people in Arizona and California got valley fever in 2019. Okay, most people don't know that's what they have because it does require a specific lab test to diagnose it. And most people just think they have the flu or something, but they actually start coughing up blood. They have really difficulty breathing, weight loss, a rash, chest pain, fatigue. It's not passed person to person. Okay, so it's not contagious. But if you are out in the desert is kind of where that occurs. The deserts of California and Arizona, you can see the circle here. Symptoms arise about 1 to 3 weeks after exposure. So there are other disorders caused by fungi here. There's fungal tuberculosis that is a problem. So I didn't cover all of them. I just mostly wanted you to get the idea that fungi can cause diseases in humans and they're very, very hard to kill. Fungi, though, have some beneficial roles, and this is a big one. The invention of penicillin as an antibiotic greatly increased human lifespan. This was a big deal. I mean, people used to die of a tooth infection. Infection killed millions of people worldwide every year, and this was the first effective antibiotic that humans invented. And it is actually the penicillium fungus. You can see penicillium here, and you can see the spores. So that's a huge beneficial role. We make a lot of food products from fungus. To me, the best cheeses are the moldy cheeses. So here's the list here, just some of the cheeses that are made from fungi. Beer and wine, any of the alcohols that are made using yeast. So yeast is a fungus. Okay, and it's obviously all the bread products, anything that, pizza dough, donuts, breads, all those yummy, yummy things that we rely on that are made by yeast. And then soy products, soy sauce, miso, tofu, and then nutritional yeast that's in a lot of products today. So fungi make some really good things for us. And they didn't even put the really tasty ones on here: mushrooms, morels, truffles, not the chocolate truffles, but the actual real truffles that are found in the ground by pigs, and now dogs in France are actually trained to find truffles as well. There are some important chemicals that are made using fungi. So citric acid, malic acid, lactic acid, these are all in food products that we eat. Some industrial enzymes such as lipase, cellulase, amylase are made using fungi. Lipase is actually used in laundry detergent. We can kill insects with fungus, and these fungi are very insect species specific in some cases, so we don't have to worry about them damaging the plants, but instead you can infect the insect population, and then you can kill those insects without having to poison our environment and poison our food supply, which is pretty amazing. Okay, this is just a picture of lichens. And again, they're a symbiotic relationship between an algae and a fungus. And they have all these different shapes and forms and colors. I just think they're beautiful. I love lichens. I think they're a pretty cool association of two organisms. And of course, as I mentioned before, they are decomposers. And in fact, fungi are the only decomposers that can break down wood and cellulose in the forest. So they are really the chief decomposers in the forest. And that's very important because that is what returns the nutrients to the soil. We don't have an infinite supply of nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. And for other plant life to grow and become part of the food chain, so that nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur is passed on to other organisms such as us, we need organisms to break down that material. So that's the fungi. I know that's a very short lecture about them, but that's all I have to say about them today.